शान्तिरन्तरिक्षगं शान्तिर् द्यौ शान्तिर् दिशः शान्तिरवान्तर दिशा शान्तिरग्निः शान्तिर्वायुः शान्तिरादित्यः शान्तिश्चन्द्रमा शान्तिर्नक्षत्राणि शान्तिरापः शान्तिरोषधयः शान्तिर्वनस्पतयः शान्तिर्गौ शान्तिरजा शान्तिरश्वः शान्तिः पुरुषः शान्तिर्ब्रह्म शान्तिर्ब्राह्मणः शान्तिः शान्तिरेव शान्तिः शान्तिर्मे अस्तु शान्तिः. May there be peace on earth and in the sky. May there be peace in the water and in all directions. May there be peace in the plants, in the trees, and in animals. May there be peace in the hearts of all beings. May there be peace in everyone and in everything. Sarvetra sukhinas santu, sarve santu niramayaha, sarve bhadrani pashyantu, ma kaschit dukkha bhag bhavet, sarvastaratu durgani, sarvo bhadrani pashyatu, sarvas sadbuddhimapnotu, sarvas sarvatra nandatu. May all be happy and healthy. May all see what is good, and may no one experience misery. May all overcome their obstacles and acquire good tendencies. May people everywhere find joy and fulfillment. Let us now spend some time touching the center of peace and joy in our hearts. A good way to begin the practice is to withdraw the scattered energies of the mind and bring them to rest on one point. That point can be our own breathing. Let us therefore practice breathing with awareness. As we breathe in, let us visualize that our body and mind are being filled with love, strength, and compassion. And as we breathe out, let us release all the stress, anxiety, and exhaustion in the body and mind. Let us practice this way for a while. Let us now turn our attention to the region of our heart. Although God is present everywhere and in everyone, the divine presence can be felt most clearly in our hearts. We can meditate in any way we have been taught. To remain focused, we can take the help of a short mental prayer or a mantra or a divine name. Let us now spend some time dwelling on the presence of God in our hearts. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.
We will sing Jaya Vireshwara on page 46.
Shara
Asatoma Satkamaya Tamasoma Jyotirgamaya Mrityorma Amritam Gamaya Aviravirma Eti Rudrayate Dakshinam Mukham Tenamam Pahi Nityam. May the Divine lead us from the unreal to the real, from darkness to light, from death to immortality. May the Divine Consciousness fill our hearts and protect us. Our subject today is the fruit of yoga. We know that the fruit in the Garden of Eden created a big problem, and of course the first thing that it did was to separate us from God. That we were close to God, in the company of God, and then that, whether it was apple or which fruit we don't know, but one fruit really created the problem. If that fruit in the Garden of Eden created a problem, then the fruit of yoga might be able to solve that problem. Because what the fruit of yoga is, the word yoga itself means to join. So the fruit of yoga, the result of yoga, is to reconnect. So if we have become separated from the highest being, then the practice of yoga is what will reconnect us, will make us go back to that divine being. Objectively speaking, that supreme being is what we call God. Subjectively, the same being is seen as our own true self. So when we speak about the Atman and when we speak about God, we are not speaking about two different entities. It just depends on the perspective. If we think of that one goal as objectively, which is really what most of us do most of the time, and we see that being as God. When we look at it subjectively, then that same being is this divine center of our own existence. So I said the word yoga means that process, those practices which connect us back to that divine being, and that is the fruit. As we have seen on earlier occasions, the word yoga is of course a very popular word. It's become so, it's entered not only English but in many world languages. And when words go across, not simply from one language to another, but from one culture to another, one tradition to another, then they sometimes acquire different shades of meaning, or their meanings might get somewhat modified. And so therefore, the same word across different traditions might not exactly mean the same thing. So when we speak about yoga, whatever our present ideas of yoga may be, it's helpful to see what the word meant in its essence. And when we look at the essence, it's always good to go back to the language in which that word originated. Now, yoga is a Sanskrit term, and going to the root of that, the Sanskrit root from which the word originated, it has two primary meanings. One meaning of yoga is concentration, and another meaning of yoga is union or to join. Comes close to the English word to yoke. And the word yoga is used in these ancient texts in both these meanings. In Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, the word yoga primarily means concentration. And that is why we speak about the chitta vritti nirodha in Sanskrit, means stilling the waves of the mind. So making the mind calm and concentrated. And that's what yoga means in the Yoga Sutras. In Vedanta, and of course in all the texts like the yoga, the Gita and the Upanishads, the meaning concentration is implicit, but what it primarily means there is to join. And in order to join, we need at least two things. And so here, it is the joining of the finite with the infinite, the joining of the individualized soul with the supreme soul. In the language of devotion, that will be the joining of the creature with the creator, the joining of the devotee with the supreme being, God. The word yoga occurs in many, as I said, not only in many ancient Hindu texts, but also a Buddhist Jain text as well. It's amazing how, so it's several thousand years old. And religious practices in these many different traditions also employ the word yoga in one way or the other. So you can see yoga has a much larger history beyond the particular yoga studio or the modern versions of yoga that you may be familiar with. And when the word becomes popular, the practice becomes popular, when it becomes marketable, then you have even more varieties coming in. So nowadays you even hear about hot tub yoga or Vikram yoga, I mean all these yoga. Now they may have some idea related to the ancient yoga itself, no doubt about it, but it's always helpful to go to the root meaning and to see what it means. Because yoga is so old, and because it has proliferated in so many different ways, in so many different traditions, it's sometimes difficult to grasp the extent of what yoga is. And one of the great contributions of Swami Vivekananda was to find a way to classify, to categorize this vast yogic literature and the vast yogic practices. And the way Swami Vivekananda did was to look deeply into all of these yoga practices and found something which in retrospect seems common sense, but nobody had thought of it before. And it is this, that no matter which practice people are engaged in whichever tradition, in whichever part of the world, the primary instrument that we have to do these practices is the mind. And we all, since we are all human beings, the contents of our mind may be different, but the functions of our mind are not different. So every one of us, what are the functions of the mind? There is one that's sometimes called the cognitive function, the mind's capacity to know, to understand, to reason out. We all have that capacity. Then there is the affective function, the mind's capacity to feel, the emotions and feelings that we have. Again, every mind has emotions and feelings. And a third function of the mind is called the cognitive function, the willpower. Again, every mind has some willpower or the other. Some may have more, some may have it less, some may use it more, some may use it less, but we have all of these three functions. And what Vivekananda did was to identify all of these yogic practices with one of these three functions. So we see that certain spiritual practices, since we use our mind for every practice, certain spiritual practices predominantly use the cognitive function, the capacity to reason, the capacity to understand. So all those spiritual practices in which the faculty of reason was the dominant function that was employed, Swami Vivekananda classified all practices that go under it as Jnana Yoga, the path of knowledge. Similarly, those spiritual practices which predominantly use the capacity of emotions and feelings, which manifested as love for God, devotion for God, became the path of devotion, bhakti. Again, all of those practices, whether they are Hindu, Buddhist, Islamic, Christian, Jewish, any of those practices, but which primarily employ the power of emotions, the power to love, got classified under this path of devotion, the path of love, the path of bhakti. Then the third function is the will. Now, when that power of the will is used to purify and then employ in our work in the external world through work, then that became the path of karma yoga, the path of work, how we work in the world unselfishly, and that itself then can become a way to free us. And the same power of will employed in the internal world, that became what is called Raja Yoga, the path of meditation, the path of contemplation. So that was a unique contribution of Vivekananda to philosophical thought, and that is finding a way to categorize all spiritual practices according to the dominant function of the mind. And therefore, that's how these 4 yogas have come. And they are among the most well-known books of Swami Vivekananda: Bhakti Yoga, Raja Yoga, Karma Yoga, and Jnana Yoga. In one of the letters, Swami Vivekananda wrote that I want to leave behind something which will be like textbooks for future generations of spiritual seekers. And these 4 books are like textbooks now for many of us, and certainly for students of Vedanta. One thing that is helpful when we study these great books, and that is, and especially not only ancient texts like the Gita, the Upanishad, and so on, but also books like these great books of Vivekananda and any really scriptural text, that most of these texts have a key to unlock, so to speak. That if we can find the key to unlock it, then the essence of that book becomes revealed to us. In other words, it's like this. When you read any book, and many books will have lots of ideas in it, and at the end of the book, if you ask yourself, what have I read? What have I gained? What is it that I have understood? And if all of it is just a bunch of ideas, oh, these are the 10 or 15 ideas that I learned, it's very difficult to keep it in mind. But all good books, and certainly the revealed text, the scriptures, are not just a bunch of ideas. So there is a connecting theme. There is a key. I like the word key. There is a key to it. So if you are able to find that one unifying, connecting link, then all of those disparate ideas in it, they all come together. And then you know exactly where everything fits in. And therefore, when we study Vivekananda's these 4 yogas, it's not just a bunch of ideas that you find in Karma Yoga or a bunch of ideas you find in different yoga. But if you find the key, then that yoga becomes easy to practice and easy to understand. So what are the keys? So 4 yogas will have 4 keys. And then maybe there is some master key afterward, which I'll tell you in the end. So the key to unlock Karma Yoga is detachment. The key to Bhakti Yoga is love. The key to Jnana Yoga is discernment. And the key to Raja Yoga is concentration. So when the will, the power of the will is purified and then employed in the external world through our work, it takes the form of detachment. And we have seen on earlier occasion, we'll see a little bit even today, of what this working without attachment does and how it can benefit us. Similarly, the same power of will, when again purified and employed in the internal world, it takes the form of concentration. And that's what helps in the practice of meditation. When the power of reason is purified and employed, then that takes the form of discernment. Reason, while the capacity to reason is very helpful, even the reason needs to be purified. Because then a reason which is not purified will help me find a way to arrive at conclusions which are self-destructive. And therefore, reason needs purification as well. And of course, finally, the power of emotions. Emotions and feelings are probably the most powerful force within us. Even though most of us human beings pride ourselves into being very rational people or logical people, most of us are not. Even from our own experience, but also from a lot of research that has been done, it's known that almost all of the decisions we take in life, almost all of the choices we make in life are not arrived at logically. There's always the gut feeling. You always say, I want this. This is what I choose. And then once you choose something, it's your feeling, it's your emotions that draw you, that attract you to making one choice or another. And after making that choice, then we use the power of reason to arrive at that predetermined conclusion. And then we kind of flip that chronology, and then we fool ourselves into saying, I first thought out all the pros and cons, and then I have arrived at this conclusion. But really, what had happened was, my mind was already bent on either doing something or not doing something, and then I took the power of my reason to arrive at that conclusion. And so, emotions and feelings are very powerful. But just as any powerful instrument, if they are not used well, if they are not employed properly, they can do more harm than good. So when this power to feel, the power of emotions is purified and then employed, then that becomes the key to unlock the path of bhakti, the path of love for God. So love for God is love, and we have love for so many other entities. So that same love, so as love, it's not different. But our capacity to love can be directed to God naturally, spontaneously, freely, only when that love is purified. So let's take quickly these four yogas and see what do we do. Karma yoga, I said the key is detachment. The more we work out of attachment, by attachment is meant not only that we attach to work, but we are attached also to the results of work. Now both of these things bind us. The more they bind us, bondage is never fun. Bondage is always, it's so obvious. Bondage takes away whatever freedom that we have, whatever the joy and contentment that we have. So if we can work out of freedom, not work out of a sense of duty, but duty is good. I mean, working out of a sense of duty is good, but better would be that I do this not simply because it's my duty, but I love doing it. I do this thing because it is right. Whether or not it's pleasant, it's right. Whether or not it's something I love, but it's good. So you do something good because it is good. You do something right because it's right, not because you're attached to it. That kind of work will produce freedom. That kind of work will give that fruit of yoga, which is connecting us with that higher reality. So one way of doing that work is to work, as Swami Vivekananda called it, work for work's sake. Just do something right because it's right, not because you expect something from anyone. Most of us may not expect for every work we do. Surely when you go and you go for your job and the job that you do to earn your livelihood, we might say, well, I'm doing my job because, of course, I expect to be paid for it. And I need to be paid for it because I need to pay my bills, I need to survive. granted, perfect, that's fine. But if the only motivation I have for my work is that I want to be paid for it and the salary that I get, then that's a little bit sad. Why I say that is because at least 1/3, or probably usually more than 1/3 of our life, our working life, goes in the various kind of work that we do to earn our livelihood. And if the only motivation behind that is, well, I just want my dollars at the end of the week or at the end of the month, then a 1/3 of my life doesn't really belong to me. I have literally sold away 1/3 or more of my own life to someone else. Now, we don't have to do it. We can still do the work, we can still get paid for it, but do the work, try to find something more in the work than just looking at it as another way to earn some money. So it's possible to get from the work not just the salary, but also joy, also satisfaction. And that's what Karma Yoga teaches us. When that comes, then we are able to work more out of freedom. So that is work for work's sake. And some of us are fortunate to be able to find a work which also pays us and which we love. That's great. But sometimes it may so happen, circumstances might be such that we don't particularly love our work, but I need to do it because that's my job. When such things happen, we can either then just say, well, I'll only look forward to a weekend and then do what I want because the rest of the time I can't. Or find a way to love your work even if you right now don't feel that you love it. Now, the trick is this. Anything in life, anything that is good and ethical, obviously, if you put some effort into it, you'll always find there's something to like in it. And so maybe 90% of the things in your work you don't like, then try to look at those 10% that you like and focus on that so you can get more after the work that you do. Same thing with regard to people. And I've said this often, that in spiritual life it's helpful not to have, we all have likes and dislikes, but to have strong likes and strong dislikes is a big obstacle in spiritual life. So one of the first things to do is try to tone down your likes and dislikes. Still continue to dislike a few things if you want. Well, you're going to like a few things, but you can reduce the intensity a little bit. About the things that we dislike, about the people that we dislike, if we look deeply into all of those things and make some effort, you will see that there'll be something to like in them. Even in the person you hate most, there'll be something to like in that person. Even if you hate in some food that you totally dislike, you just look and say there may be something. And maybe that could be the reason why sometimes when parents wanted children to eat something, I remember my mother used to often say, I hated bitter gourd. And my mother would say, oh, you eat this will purify your blood, this is good. Now, when you're children, you don't believe, just like they just want me to eat it, so they're saying it. But again, there could be some truth in it. And well, if you focus on that, then you say, well, even if the taste is something I don't like, but it's doing me some good. So, since everything, if we see everything is created by God, if it's come from God, then it can't be totally bad, it can't be totally useless, can't be totally hate-worthy. So, the more and this is a spiritual practice in itself, learning to see goodness everywhere. Now, we might say, well, I don't want to kid myself, what is bad, it's bad. What is stupid. I just want to be truthful. Yeah, be truthful by all means. But from a spiritual standpoint, as I said, if you make an effort, you will see some goodness, some greatness in everything and everyone. And that's very helpful. That's much more helpful for one's own personal spiritual life than be always picking holes and faults everywhere. So work for work's sake. And a second way of doing karma yoga is easier for devotees of God. If you have a devotion to any personal form of divinity, then we can work out of love for God. Work as an offering to God. Don't do just work, as Swami Vivekananda used to say, work as worship. So worship, we think sometimes is restricted only in temples. But no, worship can be done. We can be literally worshipping every day, everywhere. A teacher, when a teacher teaches his or her students, the teacher is worshipping God who comes in the form of students. And the worship is done there through giving of knowledge. A physician, he is worshipping the God who comes in the form of a suffering patient. And the worship is done through offering medicine and treatment, and so on. So literally, if God is present in everyone and everything, if we can make an effort to remember as often as possible that the person in front of me is God in a human form, it will be very difficult to be disrespectful to anyone. We will naturally be respectful to everyone because it's God in that particular form. So that's one way of practicing karma yoga. In bhakti yoga, I said it's purification of emotions. And the best way of purifying oneself is through repeating the name of God or doing any activity which is connected with God in some way. At the level of the mind, at the level of the speech, that's of course one way could be reading and reciting sacred texts, recitation of the Gita, for instance, a few verses daily, doing so. Many people do it. The best way is repeating the name of God, which could be a short prayer, could be a mantra. The practice of japa is one of the most powerful practices to purify one's feelings, one's emotions. Holy Mother Sharda Devi used to say, Japat Siddhihi, japa alone, even if you don't do anything else, if you do japa, if you repeat the name of God with all devotion and faith regularly, daily, that can take you to the highest experience. So that is the way to practice purifying one's emotions through japa, through meditation, through recitations of hymns and prayers, through music. Singing of devotional songs is another powerful way of purifying one's emotions. In Jnana Yoga, the primary practices are considered three. They're in Sanskrit, they're called Shravana, Manana, and Nididhyasana. Shravana means hearing, Manana is reflection, and Nididhyasana means meditation. So first is, according to, if you reason out, if you employ primarily the faculty to reason things out, we read in Vedanta that essentially our main problem is that we have forgotten who we are. That in reality we are the infinite being and we have fallen asleep, we have started dreaming and started seeing ourselves as the human beings. So Shakespeare was onto something when he said all the world's a stage. If Shakespeare had lived in the 21st century, he might have revised that statement to all the world's a 3D movie. And that's what it is. And why do we need to go and pay to see these movies in theaters when they're not even half as interesting as this big 3D movie we are seeing right from the time we are born? As I sometimes say, why do you need a subscription to Netflix when you have a free subscription to Worldflix? The reason we are not able to enjoy this great cosmic movie is that we are not watching it. We have begun acting in it. We have got so consumed by it, got so involved into it, that we are acting. And you see, I mean, if any of you have seen any of these movie shootings, they're extremely boring. It's very boring affair. But then later on, when it's all edited and all the thing is done, you go and watch a movie for 80, 90 minutes and everyone enjoys it. But though the actors themselves, they're bored to death, just repeating the same thing again and again. Now, that's our problem. We have become actors. And we are really the infinite being. We are doing the role of human beings. And we are just acting. And of course, we are not enjoying the movie. The moment you become a viewer, and then you enjoy the movie. And so being a witness is the primary practice in Jnana Yoga. So what does these three practices mean? Hearing, reflection, and meditation. First is, of course, we need to hear the truth. Now, the word hearing, what's so hearing? Why didn't they say reading? Why just hearing? The reason is, to say that Vedanta is old is an understatement. Vedanta is so old that it was way before things were written down. It was way before people were reading. So the only way to get knowledge in those old days was to go to some person and hear about it from some knowledgeable person. So it was literally hearing. And of course, later on, today, after things started, people started writing it down, first on parchment paper, these parchments of the trees, and then later on, of course, the invention of the paper and then printing just revolutionized the whole thing. So reading is a way we get knowledge nowadays, but not just reading, of course. Well, every Sunday you come, you listen. So we get a lot of our knowledge through lectures, classes, retreats, through audiobooks, through podcasts. So we are still hearing. But hearing here is a more technical sense. And what we get through all of these, through lectures and all of it, is more an information. So the process of squeezing wisdom or knowledge out of information, and that is what hearing really means. And so through all of these Vedanta texts that you have read, through all of the things that you have heard, you need to squeeze wisdom out of it. And what is that wisdom? And if you employ the power of reason, it simply means this: to recognize that, first of all, nothing lasts. Everything is changing, except the one who is perceiving the change. No one can be sure about the status of the objective reality. Just like in dreams, the world appears real in dream. When we wake up, it appears to be unreal. So what we see outside may be real, may be unreal, could be a dream, may not be a dream. None of us is ever sure about it. The only thing we are sure about is ourselves, that the one who is perceiving the change. And that one who is perceiving the change is that infinite, supreme divine reality. That's what Jnana Yoga says. So that's, you hear that truth through all the stuff that you read about or through everything that you hear about from different sources. Now, immediately after hearing, if we are ready for that truth, we should become enlightened. We have heard about this for years together, many of us. Still, we haven't become enlightened. And so the next thing we have to do, therefore, is to begin reflecting on it. And reflection would really mean, because doubts come, questions come. It's called, in Sanskrit, it's called asambhavana. It's easy for, when you hear the truth and say, oh, the infinite reality is within me, I'm not the body, I'm not the this, and I'm the infinite being. But immediately after hearing that, it feels good, but we are not free from doubts. It's like, how can I be the infinite being? How can this little self be one with that supreme self? How could this world be unreal? That's called asambhavana, samshaya, doubts. In order to overcome these doubts, we need to reflect over this. That's the second practice in Jnana Yoga. Now, for some of the people, through reflection, their doubts are removed and they become enlightened. Now, what if, even after doing a lot of reflection, you still don't become enlightened? that means there is a greater obstacle still. And that is called Viparita Bhavana. Viparita Bhavana means I not only have doubts about it, I am convinced about there's a contrary knowledge. In other words, I just don't feel how can I be the Atman, but I'm convinced I am this body. This world is objectively very real, and so on. And so then you need to do a more drastic medicine. So more than reflection, then you need meditation. So nididhyasana. So that's how the basic practices. Again, we're not going into any details, just to know what these practices entail. And finally, in Raja Yoga, it's not often recognized that Swami Vivekananda's Raja Yoga is really Swami Vivekananda's Raja Yoga. It seems like a very Zen-like statement. What it means is this: the term Raja Yoga existed even before Swami Vivekananda used it. Now, if you go to that classical Raja Yoga, that means something a little bit different from what you find in Vivekananda's book called Raja Yoga. And so if you see Swami Vivekananda's book Raja Yoga, it's actually, it's a very unique combination. It's a Vedantic metaphysic combined with Patanjali's Yoga Sutras. Added to that is portions from Kundalini Yoga. So it's a hybrid, so to speak, tested and authenticated by Swami Vivekananda's own life and experiences. So it's really Swamiji's Raja Yoga. It's not the way it is presented and explained. You won't find it in any text. It was the first time that Swami Vivekananda did it, and therefore I say it's a very unique in many ways. Although the term Raja Yoga itself is older. So the practice, the primary practice, the key to Raja Yoga we have seen is concentration. It's stilling of the waves in the mind. And as the primary practice, there are these it's called the eightfold path, Ashtanga Yoga, which includes Yama, Niyama, the control of the mind, the control of the senses, Asana, Pranayama, Pratyahara, all these technical terms, essentially meaning controlling oneself, controlling the mind, withdrawing the mind every time it gets distracted, finding a stable posture to sit and then focus the mind. And the last three steps are all dealing with concentration. In the weeks ahead, we will find ways to look at these practices a little bit more deeply. Now, each of these four yogas, Swami Vivekananda said, is capable of giving us that highest truth, is capable of giving us that fruit of connecting us back to God. If you are expelled from the Garden of Eden, there is a way to get back into it. And each of these yogas, in other words, any spiritual practice, whether it is predominantly using the power to reason, whether it predominantly uses the power of devotion, whether it predominantly uses the willpower, any of these are capable of taking me back to God. Ideally, Swami Vivekananda said, it's good to employ them all together, because although we have all these three faculties in our mind, they all may not be equally developed. And that's true. We see that some people are more sentimental than they are rational. Some people may be more rational than they are sentimental. In some people's lives, the will may be stronger than the other two, which is okay. So very rarely do we find all of these three in equal proportion. And because of that, we will be naturally attracted to one or the other of these yogas, which is fine also. So there is no particular yoga is easy or difficult. So some people might be naturally attracted to the path of love, path of devotion. Some people may be naturally attracted to the path of jnana. Some people may be naturally attracted to the path of work, which is okay. But if we can employ the other practices as well, which allow us to develop the other faculties in the mind which may not be so predominant in our own mental makeup, then there is greater harmonious development within us. And one way of practicing it, so it doesn't mean really that you do say 2 hours in the morning dhyana yoga and then do some singing and that's bhakti yoga and then go and do some work that's karma yoga. No, that's not what is meant. So it's not, you can't like say, let me do a little bit of yoga every day. That's again we're creating more walls. We are again compartmentalizing our spiritual life into 4 compartments. So spiritual life is an undivided life. We can't group them that way. So one way is to find a way to integrate all of our practices in such a way that they give enough scope for our emotions to be purified and employed, our willpower to be purified and employed, and our capacity to reason purified and employed. And Swami Vivekananda said, one way of doing it is, whichever practice you are engaged in, whatever you are doing, do it with full attention. And of course, whatever you're doing, again, it all implies whatever ethical and moral thing you're doing. It's not like I'm doing something evil if I do it with full attention. Actually, and even if you're doing something bad, you do it with full attention, you will do it that will be successful. But that's not the goal here. I mean, think about it. Some of these major robberies and crimes that have been done, if they're well planned with full attention, they accomplish it nicely. But spiritual life, when I say whatever, I really mean whatever that is ethical and moral. That's the baseline. So I don't have to every time keep on saying it. So every time I say whatever, so understand it in that sense. So when Swamiji said, whatever you are doing, do it with full attention. So if you are doing some work, if you're doing it selflessly, tell yourself that work itself, doing it well, will make me free. Don't think that it's just a part of my practice. No. Give your full mind to it. When you're doing your japa, doing your meditation, know that meditation, that repetition itself will give you freedom. Don't think of anything else at that moment. But once that practice is over, have the freedom to withdraw your mind from that and put it on the next activity. And all of this requires, therefore, enough control over the mind to be able to attach to the activity on hand with full force and then withdraw the mind and put it on activity next. And that comes through practice. It's not easy, but it's not impossible. But it needs practice. And finally, one way of doing this, at least to make a good beginning, is something that most of you are familiar with and that I like very much. I call them as 4 simple exercises. So if you want to just a one-liner for each of these yogas, then one way to begin the practice of karma yoga is to keep on doing good, but forget all the good that you have done. Keep on doing good, but don't hold on to it. Just do it selflessly. Don't expect anything back. One way to begin the practice of Raja Yoga, to have that control over mind, is forget all the bad that other people have done to you. Don't carry any grudge. Don't carry any anger. Don't carry any hatred in your heart. One way to begin the practice of Dhyana Yoga is to remember that everything is impermanent. Nothing lasts. So it'll be easier to let go of things when you know that it's going to slip away from your hands anyway. So that's the way to begin the practice of Dhyana Yoga. And one way to begin the practice of Bhakti Yoga is to remember that everything else may go away. The only being that remains is God. So God alone is permanent. God alone is eternal. So at least with these 4 simple exercises, we can enter this great world of yoga. And the more we are able to follow all the practices in it with faith, with devotion, with sincerity, with regularity, the fruit of yoga will be in our hands. It's a great fruit. I mean, think about it. What could be more valuable than eternal freedom? What could be more valuable than freedom from all suffering? That's all that we really seek. We might not always express what we want in these terms, but whatever it is that we want in life, if you just squeeze it enough, then at the bottom will be this: I just want to be happy. I don't want to suffer. That's the bottom line. If that's what we want, then these kind of spiritual practices would give us exactly that. So it's a very precious fruit, but nothing comes cheap, nothing is free. And so if we put in the effort, this fruit will be ours. Om Jananim Saradam Devim Ramakrishnam Jagadgurum Padapadme Tayo Shritva Pranamami Muhur Muhu. We bow down, Sri Ramakrishna and Holy Mother. Next Sunday, we have a guest speaker from India, Swami Tyagananda, a senior monk of the Ramakrishna order, will be visiting, and he will speak on service as spiritual practice. So I would encourage you to come and attend this talk next Sunday. This Wednesday, we will not have the Gita class. We will resume the study group meetings from next Wednesday. But Tuesday and Saturday, we'll have the Arati and meditation as usual. Before we go to the prayer, I have one news to give you. Swami Shantarupanandaji, who is the head of our Vedanta Society in Portland, Oregon, he passed away last week. I visited him last week in San Francisco, Santa Rosa in California, and it was rather sudden. It wasn't expected, but I was by his bedside when he passed away. They will have the memorial meeting sometime in the next month. You'll find more information about it on the website of the Vedanta Society in Portland. Let's conclude with a prayer on page 3 of your books. May the Divine Being, who is the Father in heaven of the Christians, Holy One of the Jewish faith, Allah of the Muslims, Buddha of the Buddhists, Tao of the Taoists, Ahura Mazda of the Zoroastrians, the Great Spirit of the Native Americans, and Brahman of the Hindus, lead us from the unreal to the real, from darkness to light, from death to immortality. May we be granted strength, freedom, and clear understanding. May we learn to see God in our own hearts and in everyone around us. May God bless us all and fill our hearts with gratitude, grace, and love. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Peace, peace, peace be unto all.